It is a conspiracy. It all points to the need that patriots like you and I and those that really have greater confidence in fair elections, that the outcome would be known. The manipulation of a ballot, numbers came back differently.
If voting was done on 1 or 2 days, and if national voter ID passed, what happens to the Democratic Party?
I believe that they would lose, and they know that.
So we're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
I was a January 6th defendant. They destroyed my professional career, my personal life. I ended up getting a divorce. It was a terrible thing. You and I have seen federal contractors encourage 500,000 armed people to come on their own podcast.
The question is now, what are Republicans going to do about it?
So I did a podcast with our mutual friend, Alan Dershowitz. And after Kennedy was killed, LBJ went to Justice Warren and said, look, whatever you do not provide any evidence that the Russians had anything to do with the assassination. And so LBJ was telling them what they could not find, which I find very interesting that he was involved in that regard. When you were behind the scenes and with your family history, did you hear any more about that investigation that you found intriguing or you found curious?
I have not. I did not. I was in high school at the time. My father, as you could imagine, did not speak at all about matters.
Yeah.
We did have conversation later in the life when the book was written about all of these matters after the book and Gary Cartwright but these things are of an intrigue to people who do look and piece together things. And it is utterly amazing the use of political patronage and influence about how it has infected law enforcement.
Okay, now I kind of want to move on to some more current events. I had a couple questions I wanted to talk to you about briefly. January 6th, and then the national voter ID, and we'll start with that. So do you feel like that there's any potential that Congress will pass a law that will require national voter ID?
The bill that I have very much been a part of and am putting together really is being a follow-up to the evidence that is coming out of not just Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice, but across other states that are providing information about the influence, the mischaracterization, and the things that happened going back to 2018. Those things have become material now. And there are a lot of people that suspect they do know what happened and how it happened. There are people in our midst who have failed to gather the data and information. We've all seen what happened with Dinesh D'Souza, that he did his movie that was dead on about how during COVID, these governors, including in the state of Texas, where Governor Abbott extended by 2 weeks voting, that was not part of law. All of these things have been updated in the last few years, going across not just Wisconsin, not just Arizona, Georgia, Texas. So it all points to the need that patriots like you and I and those that really have greater confidence in fair elections, that the outcome would be known, not only the true outcome, but really the integrity of that is something that comes down to ballots. And ballots that they want paper ballots. They want to lessen the amount of time. There are a lot of people who do see where that the manipulation of a ballot into a server that then goes other places, and most people do not understand this, but these servers have been unplugged within that jurisdiction. It was moved and went overseas. Numbers came back differently. There were a number of things which have now been better understood and placed into a perspective. So now many states and many people want a shorter election. They want to require, and this is really because the Democratic Party had their H.R. 1 and 2 bills that said anybody 16 and above could register to vote. Anybody could register same day, vote same day. All of these are the essence of similar to what President Clinton did with motor voter back in 1994, where that allows huge gaping holes, not only in the integrity of the process, but the law that would accompany that, including keeping people on the roll that legally states cannot take them off for 2 election cycles. And so all of these things have come to play. We're attempting to look at this. As you may be aware, Chip Roy had a bill that was very, very similar, that was designed to make sure that the people who voted would be American citizens. They had to present identification, and it received a rough opening on the floor. I was sitting in the chair the entire time, serving as Speaker Pro Tem. Watched this debate with great interest. Ours goes further in different ways. And so we are still working on this bill because we'd like it to become law. During this period of time, President Trump is continuing to move the agenda, and members of Congress are stumbling behind that with the media to catch up to the president, and we're stumbling to pass our own legislation that would correspondingly help the president to get his financial goals in place, of not just tax laws, but of spending that we're going to have. And so it just finding the oxygen to do this has not been capable up to now. So that's the status of that bill. We are also in collaboration with a number of people because it moves the election to 2 days. And getting everybody to vote in 2 days is hard. We've looked at Arizona, we've looked at other places, and so there's suggestions about making it a national holiday, making companies give people the time off, but they're still in collaboration with these entities of getting all these people to vote in 2 days is almost an impossibility for many large cities.
Well, let me ask you a direct question.
We're trying to make sure that we measure 3 times and saw once.
Yeah, you always want to measure at least twice before you cut. But I want to ask you directly, if voting was done on 1 or 2 days, and if national voter ID passed, what happens to the Democratic Party?
I believe what's happening, Brady, today is that the party, as all parties do, they reevaluate their position.
But will they lose? Will they lose if those things happen?
Well, they are already, because of ID that is required just to be on an airplane. They're having to come back and change a lot of their rules and laws about whether other people have received the identification required to let them travel on an airplane. We're going through this now with sanctuary cities. It is all balled up. Yes, I believe that they would lose, and they know that.
Okay.
So answer your question, yes.
And then, so I was a January 6th defendant. They destroyed my professional career, my personal life. I ended up getting a divorce. It was a terrible thing. And you and I have seen, I guess, circumstantial evidence that there was potentially at least former federal contractors that were promoting and encouraging people to come to January 6th. They were encouraging people to come. They encouraged 500,000 armed people to come on their own podcast. And then they broadcasted from inside the Capitol on January 6th. And these individuals were never prosecuted, unlike the grannies, the moms, pops, and dentists and docs that showed up. So my question is, do you feel confident that with the new leadership in the FBI and the Justice Department, that we will see prosecutions or we will see evidence of what really conspired that day?
I think we already know a lot of things, Brady, and one of them is that the woman who was the deputy chief of the Capitol Hill Police, the intelligence unit, was never asked to come before the committee to provide the information that she had of intelligence. The chairwoman of the committee of House Administration evidently had not been even in Washington or the Capitol for months because of COVID before this occurred. The Speaker of the House exempted herself from testimony or questions about this. The Speaker of the House did not accept the selections that the minority, those are Republicans, asked to be on the committee at the time. The Capitol Hill Police Department had the lowest number of people, even though it was greatly public knowledge about what happened. Yes, there are easily 50 or 60 major points that it is a conspiracy. It was well understood. It was well understood not just by then Speaker Pelosi, that they ignored the issue at least. And so this is where the testimony for them to offer an explanation has never happened. And the question is now, what are Republicans going to do about it? And I think that the data and the information of at least fair questions need to be asked so that even I would then be able to say, and here was the testimony about why these conditions were confirmed. The now U.S. Attorney from the District of Columbia is a person who this is still sitting on his desk. He's brand new, appointing acting U.S. Attorney by Donald Trump, and he is aware of the conflicting stories. We had FBI Director Wray, who came before the committee. We've seen these very difficult questions that the director stumbled through concerning who was there, whether they were agents, whether they were asked to be there. This is where this information that goes all the way back to the JFK information is and other matters are being held and looked at. I think that we will learn a lot. Is somebody going to be held accountable for it? Well, perhaps. I think President Trump saw firsthand of the one-sided application of the law, including how the Department of Justice really made it a felony by taking a case that was out of Texas that dealt with Enron from a civil case of disrupting an official proceeding.
It begs the question, Congressman. So you're talking about 1512 C2, which I was charged with, which was based on the destruction of evidence that occurred after the Arthur Anderson Enron scandal. And so,
that's correct.
And my question is, I would imagine that before Trump took office as the 47th president of the United States, that the hum of the paper shredders could be heard across the Beltway. So do you think that the evidence still exists? Is there potential that it exists? Or is there more potential that the evidence was destroyed and thus the people that actually charged so many defendants and President Trump with this NRA era law are actually guilty of it themselves? Because the craziest explanation often ends up being the true one. And there's some divine justice, poetic justice in the fact that they may be charged with this, but do you think that there is evidence that this information was destroyed?
I think that this is something that Pam Bondi and people within the Bureau, I still believe the Bureau have many, many, many people who are in the Bureau for the right reason. I think that there was political motivation at the top. I think there was political motivation by the Department of Justice, by prosecutors. We've seen Prosecutor Smith. We already understand that he went after the former president of the United States. It's an abuse of power. Do I believe that there will be charges of abuse of power? I think it's entirely possible. But this is something that Pam Bondi is going to have to make that determination, because you see, we also have billions of dollars that have been disappeared from the Department of Treasury. We have people who offered some collusion, what I believe is collusion, to allow these things to happen. And it is a mess. There's a reason why Donald J. Trump overwhelmingly won all over this country. People saw not just lawfare, they saw their lives being interrupted, and they saw where it was an abuse of power. So I think all this is possible, but that's where Pam Bondi and the FBI director, Kash Patel, are going to have to get their heads together, and I think it's a bit too early to know the answer.
Do you think that after this, I have two more questions, and I'll let you go. But do you think that the political will exists at the U.S. Attorney for District Attorney of D.C.? Do you think that Ed Martin and Pam Bondi and Kash and Dan Bongino, is there the political will that if the evidence exist that they will prosecute, or do you feel like that there is some type of resistance in Washington that'll prevent that from happening?
Well, I think that that's a good question, and I would tell you that the Department of Justice is an agency that should follow the law and should make its own decisions, but there is also a venue question. Where would that venue be? How might this be done? How much do we pour into this? And Pam Bondi, who's the Attorney General of the United States, who I have confidence in, is going to make that decision. It ultimately comes down to the Attorney General of the United States.
And so if I'm hearing you right, and just so the audience understands, so if you were to bring a case in D.C. where you have that the judges there are very pro Biden administration, they're ardent leftists. If you were to bring a case in D.C., it's likely that it could be dismissed outright. And so the venue is really important, because it's possible that these cases couldn't progress or not progress easily if they go in front of the wrong judge, correct?
Well, I do believe that, but I think that there's a corollary to this, and it deals with what President Bush did with Gitmo and the number of people who were there. And there's a preponderance of the evidence that while they, quote, did not get their day in court, there were lots of Washington, D.C. and New York law firms representing those people on a pro bono cases, and they ended up sparing their lives, and only to find out that Joe Biden and Barack Obama would send them free. You're going to have a smoking gun.
You're on the DOGE committee, and what kind of cuts do you think, in a perfect world where you guys gain in majority after the midterms, what kind of cuts can we see from during the Trump administration from the House as a result of yours and Elon Musk's work?
I think it's important to know that DOGE is a Department of literally government efficiency, proper government efficiency to run the government properly. We probably, I think, have a legislative authority and a responsibility to figure out the sum $300 to $500 billion a year of misdirected payments.
Okay.
And you would say, well, that's spending, but you've got to remember there's this ugly term called mandatory spending. And we believe that there are a huge number of people who receive what are called misdirected payments. And it's because we have Social Security people that the president's spoken about. We've got to figure out how we're going to make this system work and work properly. So all these cuts would mean less spending. So on the mandatory side, we do not budget for that. But if we wipe out or look at misdirected payments, we can save $200 or $300 billion a year. But that is not something we even budget for.
Okay.
So we just need to make sure that we're always talking apples, and oranges when we're talking about that. And this has to do with a process that, as chairman of government operations, under and with James Comer, we are looking at how much the government, because they were not at work, just flew out the door. We know at least $300 billion a year. So we've got to go back into the integrity, and I will be counting on DOGE and Elon Musk's smart guys. We are creating what is essentially a negative file. What have we learned in running everything through a negative file before it goes out, rather than it goes out and then we call it misdirected payments or chase after it? We're in the process of doing that now. That is why we're working with DOGE. We do not have that information. The administration does. So we're in talks with the administration to do that. So it was never authorized in spending. It came out of mandatory spending. And yes, sir, we can cut what we believe is $200 billion a year by becoming efficient and doing our job in business.
Okay, and the last question I wanted to give you is, I had spoken to other members of Congress, and they were telling me that during the Biden administration, there was so much pressure. They were all concerned about cases being filed on them, or they were being followed, that there was so much pressure, maybe from the intelligentsia and from the sins of prosecutorial discretion that existed in the DOJ, that they couldn't effectively do their job in Congress. Now, since we have a change of administration, do you feel like now that a lot of that pressure has gone away, and Congress can be more effective without having the boogeyman looking over their shoulder?
Enough evidence to suggest that the prior administration utilized the Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, to come and open investigations, including myself. I spent $180,000 cooperating with the Department of Justice. This was done on the outer edge. It was done by U.S. attorneys that were in New York and Miami that were highly political, misused the FBI, and the FBI allowed itself to be misused. When someone cooperates with the Bureau, that should be an indication that you expect them to play fair also. So here's what I would say. We know that we have Scott Perry, very disciplined member of Congress, served our country as a colonel in the United States Army, is now, I believe, carrying a retired rank of a general in the reserves. He is smart. He's with it. He was on vacation with his family when approached by two FBI agents in front of his family with a search warrant for his phone. They were attempting to get what I believe was official business and conducted as official business. We know that the Department of Justice came and kicked in without respect to Rudy Giuliani, who was the president's lawyer, and took documents directly from his investigation of serving for the President of the United States as legal counsel. These are all very difficult issues. The other side is now screaming and yelling about wanting to, use judges and the things and at Donald Trump and this Department of Justice. We have a system that is not working properly. And this goes back to when my father, as director of the FBI, ran the place, but Janet Reno, on behalf of then the Clinton White House, he was relieved of his duty. And he stated at the time, you are now politicizing the FBI. And ever since then, these FBI directors have been beholden to the Attorney General as opposed to them being an independent agency. And it has created lawfare, and it has created what I believe is a bad circumstance for the FBI, not just the Department of Justice. So it's
is it easier for you to do your job now with the change of administration?
Oh, I don't think there's any question about that. Do we believe that on a regular basis, the Department of Justice was snooping on us? You bet we did, and there's plenty of proof of it. And Trump's former inside guys have all spent tens of millions of dollars to defend themselves, not against a charge, but against an investigation.
Finally, why did they take Scott Perry's phone? Did it have something to do with they wanted inside information about the documents case, or they were trying to help themselves politically in some fashion? What were they looking for?
Well, what they were presumptively, as I've read in the media, I do not know this from Scott. They were looking for data and information around the election and as it related to January 6th about conversation and who was supposed to do what. And I don't believe that exists. I believe the president has spoken about this. I believe no one would have said it's okay to come up and storm the Capitol and do these things. And I think that's what they're looking for, what might be a smoking gun. Scott says he was in meetings where things were discussed. And I don't need to add words to Scott, but Scott is an honorable man who served our country, and I think would never suggest overthrowing the government.
Well, I just want to end with this. Thank you for showing up. And for people that don't know, you've never missed a day at work at Congress. And at your 16 years at Southwestern Bell, you never missed a day of work. You are the Lou Gehrig. You are you never miss a game. And I'm very grateful for you showing up today and participating with me here. And I wish you and this Congress all the success that is possible for the benefit of our country.
Randy, thank you very much. And for people who, like you, I hope that you will continue to talk about the progress and the movement that we're making, because there are people, and it goes a long way back. If you're afraid of your own government, we got a problem.
Amen. Well, we'll see you around if you don't turn square, brother. Well, God bless you, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. God bless you.